Hey folks, welcome to our channel.
Family friendly bushcraft!
If you want to see different content, put it in the comments below. Click that like button, hit subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. So while we're out and about, we're sourcing our pine resin from these scars on the side of pine trees. This particular one's up in Delamere, and we can see the nodules of resin where the tree's tried to repair itself there. Quite often some of this fairly fresh resin's easily obtainable, but a lot of it will have bits of bark and bits of wood in. Now we're getting the boys ready. They're starting to get the fire pit ready to go. A little bit of instruction. Conan's there starting to prepare the area. He's going to clean out where we're putting the fire and build a platform to put the fire on from some smaller wood. The other boys are watching in, and while he's doing that, they're going to be off feathering some bits of wood, sourcing some kindling. You can see there is quite a pile of silver birch kindling on the right hand side there. Working with a little bit of birch bark as well. A bit of a belt and braces day to day. There he goes with the flint and steel. Hey, we got fire. Now we're going to do this a little bit more as time goes on. Whenever a fire needs lighting for a bushcraft job, one of the boys is going to take a turn in building, lighting the fire. So the only real way they're going to get to grips with the skills is by doing it. As you can see, there's a selection of feathered sticks there. Some kindling from the standing deadwood. Not just a variety of stuff, and it's starting to get the fire built up. Unfortunately, we're having to do the audio from the studio today. For some reason the microphone failed on the day. Might have been because some idiot forgot the cable for it, but we won't go into that. So there's the pine resin that we've collected over the course of a couple of trips out, some from the local beauty spot, others from up in the forest. As you can see, it's looking quite gnarly, it's quite bitty, there's bark in there, bits of tree, bits of dead bugs and the like. Now, some people do make a clay pot for doing this with a little hole in so they can run the melted resin out of there, and that's a really good idea. All we had to hand was this old takeaway tin, and we thought it'd make a really good impromptu. I mean, this is our first time as family friendly bushcraft making pine resin glue. There we are, getting it on the fire just to start that melting process. It doesn't really take very long. It's got quite a low melting point. You've got to be really careful using these thin aluminium foil pots, the takeaway pots, because it does very easily overheat and catch fire, and we don't want the resin burnt. Resin is, after all, the stuff that is in fat wood that makes it such a good fire lighter. Get a bit of old stick there, start to stir it around, not letting any one part of it get too hot. As I say, we don't really want it catching fire. The idea is to melt it, not to burn it. For the selection of resin we had, it probably took 10-15 minutes to melt down fully. And keep it on moving it around. Now, I have seen people do this where they'll have a couple of sticks and they'll store it on the end of those sticks, so they'll let it cool and roll it round like people would with a candy floss machine. You see, we let the flames die down now, we're just melting on the embers. It's a little bit more easy to control in this way. There you go, you can see it gassing off just there, just before I stirred it again. It's this gassing off that can very quickly lead to flame if we're not careful. Then in a minute we're going to angle the aluminium pot and start moving the bits of wood and the bits of debris out of the... There we go. See, it's starting to break down, it's starting to melt now. Now as the resin's starting to liquefy, we can see it bubbling away in the corners of the tub. Again, we're having to be careful we don't overheat it and get it to burn. Just keeping on stirring it with that bit of stick as we did before. And we're starting to get some of the debris out of there now very slowly. It's starting to become a liquid and release those bits of solid stuff that we've got no use for. There we go, we just caught fire a little bit there, just not watching it carefully enough, and that's what can happen so easily with these thin metal containers. As we say, we don't want to be burning the resin off. I've just had it off the heat for a minute while we removed some of that stuff, and you can see it's forming almost like a raft of the debris within the resin itself. As we tilt, we start to draw it up the metalwork so the resin itself would run down. Again, in the case with the people who make the clay pots for doing this with the hole in, you don't get all of that because it strains it out in the same way the filter on the Kelly kettle would strain out any coffee grounds in there that you don't get in the drop-in. There we go, just more and more of that running it up. What I'm trying to do here is run the debris up the container, keep the melted resin in the bottom as pure as I can, but melting more out of the debris as it hits the midsection. You'll notice that bit's over one of the hotter parts of the fire. There we go, starting to separate a good chunk of that debris out now. And this stuff itself can be either discarded, or you could use it in firelighting later on. You could use it almost as fat wood itself. There we go, starting to get a reasonable amount of clear resin down in the bottom corners there now. And what we're going to do with this, we're going to make an attempt at sticking an arrowhead to a hazel shaft. We got a couple of hazel shafts from in the woods the other day just for this purpose, and we cut a notch in the end of it. We don't have any flint to hand, like I say, so we're going to make an impromptu arrowhead from slate. Now, pine resin glue is really brittle when it goes hard. Some people put charcoal into it powdered and a little bit of animal fat to increase the elasticity, but in this case we've just used the pure resin. The idea being that this would be an arrowhead to hunt a large piece of game, and we would want it to snap away and to remain in the creature in order to cause more damage, more trauma, and bring the animal down eventually. A kind of persistence hunting. Now I know it's not particularly politically correct and kind to the animal, but we're trying to cast our mind back to way back when, and the idea that we either get the meat by whatever means or we go hungry. I'm just demonstrating there with the thumbnail just how hard that pine resin goes. Again, there are ways to making it a little bit more elastic, and that we shall demonstrate in another video. I've got some flint coming actually, so we'll do some proper arrowheads. Of course, that's if my napping skills are up to it. We'll still have to see, won't we? Now, hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, press that like button, subscribe if you would, and please do ring that bell for notifications. We look forward to seeing you all in the next video.